Welcome to the playoffs in the AFC for the 2012 NFL season. I'm Brad Wells of SB Nation. We're breaking down how the playoffs are shaking out for the AFC, and it starts with the #1 seeded Denver Broncos and Peyton Manning. Yes, the Denver Broncos are the #1 seed and not the Houston Texans or the New England Patriots. So all roads go through Denver if you want to go to the Super Bowl through the AFC. #2 seed is, again, the New England Patriots and Tom Brady. Oh my goodness, how the NFL is salivating at the fact that the #1 and #2 seeds in the AFC are quarterbacked by Manning and Brady. #3 are the Houston Texans. The Texans, throughout much of the season, they were just presumed to be the #1 seed. But in the month of December, I guess they just decided to stop playing. They went 2-3, including 2 terrible losses. One to the New England Patriots in New England and one at home against the Minnesota Vikings. That Viking loss at home is probably the reason why the Texans are not the #1 seed. They blew that game. They win that game, they are the #1 seed, and our whole playoff ranking right here is completely different. But they lost that game, then had to travel to Indianapolis for Week 17, and then lost that game as well. Now the Texans are at the #3 seed. And the #4 seed is the Baltimore Ravens. Now both Baltimore and Houston are stumbling coming into the playoffs, while the #5 and #6 seeds coming into the playoffs, the Indianapolis Colts and the Cincinnati Bengals respectively, they have a ton of momentum going in particular the Cincinnati Bengals. They came out of their bye week, their first game out of their bye week, they lost to the Denver Broncos and they were 3-5. They've since gone six wins in 7 games, and they have been phenomenal doing so. So Cincinnati really has a lot of momentum going into the postseason. And the Indianapolis Colts came into Week 17 with nothing to play for and decided to play their starters anyway. And the result is they beat the Houston Texans. They go into the playoffs with a lot of momentum. They're 11-5. They were 2-14 last year. Chuck Pagano is back as their head coach. So the way this is shaking out right now is that you have Indianapolis traveling to Baltimore in the wild card round and Cincinnati traveling to Houston in the wild card round. This is interesting because Cincinnati at Houston is a rematch of what the wild card round was last year. Houston won that game 31-10 due in big part to the play of J.J. Watt. Had a big interception of Andy Dalton right before halftime, really turned the momentum in that game. This time around, Texans going into the playoffs really struggling. Cincinnati going in on a high note. This is a much better Cincinnati team than Texans played last year. You can make an argument this is a worse Texan team than what Cincinnati played last year. Matt Schaub is not playing well. Running game has been inconsistent in recent weeks. Overall, it's very, very good. And the defense has not been very good. It's really, you can make a general statement here with the Texans. Their defense has not looked good since Brian Cushing went down. That is a very general statement. It's not specific in certain areas of the team, but without Brian Cushing, the Texans have had a harder time masking the weaknesses, and teams have taken advantage of those weaknesses. And it's most likely the Cincinnati Bengals would take advantage of those weaknesses. That's an upset right there. #3 seed, #6 seed in the AFC playoffs, #4 seed, #5 seed in the AFC playoffs, Indianapolis Colts traveling to Baltimore Ravens. Baltimore has not looked good going into the playoffs either. They did not play many of their starters in Week 17, and they haven't looked good in the month of December. They just fired their offensive coordinator, Cam Cameron, and replaced him with Jim Caldwell. And it's not like Caldwell's really been doing it. He's been doing okay considering the circumstances, but Baltimore's offense really hasn't been lighting the world on fire. Meanwhile, the Indianapolis Colts have come together as a team. There are wonderful storylines in this particular game. Chuck Pagano was the defensive coordinator in Baltimore last year, the head coach in Indianapolis this year, has to leave early October, late September because of cancer treatments. He's diagnosed with leukemia. Bruce Arians comes in, coaches the team to 9 wins. Pagano comes back. Now he's returning to Baltimore, and as we said earlier, Baltimore's offensive coordinator is Jim Caldwell. Jim Caldwell last year was the head coach of the Indianapolis Colts, and 2 years ago he coached them in the Super Bowl when they famously lost to the New Orleans Saints. So all kinds of storylines there. We would throw this out as well. John Harbaugh is the brother of Jim Harbaugh, and Jim Harbaugh played for both the Indianapolis Colts and the Baltimore Ravens, and Jim Harbaugh also recruited Andrew Luck, current quarterback of the Indianapolis Colts at Stanford. Speaking of Colts quarterbacks, there was a quarterback in Baltimore by the name of Unitas. Maybe you've heard of that guy. He pretty much defined what modern quarterbacking is today. Baltimore is going to see Andrew Luck really for the first time this year. A lot of people used to say when Peyton Manning played in Indianapolis that Peyton reminded them of Johnny Unitas. I've seen film and tape of both guys. I never saw that. I've watched Andrew Luck play every game this year. He reminds me of Johnny Unitas, the way he runs, the way he throws. Baltimore fans, who also have a pretty good quarterback themselves in Joe Flacco, it's going to be a very interesting game in Baltimore in the wild card round. Right now, the wild card round is ripe for upsets. Would not be surprised if Baltimore and Houston stumble and both the Colts and the Bengals advance. And that's based solely off of momentum going into the playoffs. This is going to be a great test for all the people that say that you got to have momentum going in the playoffs. There's nobody with more momentum right now than Indianapolis and Cincinnati, and there's no one stumbling their way into the playoffs more than Baltimore and Houston. So whoever wins those games, that might settle the argument right then and there. And then the winner of those games has to go to New England and to Denver in order to advance to the AFC Championship game. Not easy places to win, but it should be a great playoff race. Great playoff run, I should say. For SB Nation, I'm Brad Wells, and welcome to the playoffs.